As we told you yesterday, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has announced that he is ending President Barack Obama's executive proclamation that he would defer deporting young illegal immigrants. It was called DACA. That's the acronym, or they're called Dreamers. About 800,000 people who would normally be expelled or deported. Well, that was not passed by Congress. Like I say, it was just an executive order by Barack Obama, and so it was undone just as easily by Donald Trump. He has asked Congress that if they really want to deal with immigration, they should do so by passing laws. Well, one of the immediate reflexes, and it was said by a Canadian Liberal senator as well, is, well, hey, maybe Canada should take these illegals if the United States is getting rid of them. How many tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Mexicans and Hondurans and Salvadorians will now be coming to Canada, not by virtue of their own application, but by virtue of the fact that they are being rejected by the United States? And a secondary question is, does Canada deport people as well, including children? I think sometimes our media party doesn't know. Well, let's answer both of these questions and delve into this subject with one of Canada's leading experts on the subject. You know who I'm talking about, a longtime immigration and refugee lawyer himself, our friend Giddy Mammon, who joins us now via Skype. Great to see you again, Giddy.
Thank you for having me, Ezra. It's always great to see you.
Well, thank you, and you provide the other side of the story. I'm glad to see other media are giving you a little bit of a platform, because so far it's just been so much cheerleading for this open borders, but you've brought some real sanity. We've enjoyed your company on this show for more than a year, and I'm glad that other Canadians who don't watch The Rebel are getting your pearls of wisdom too now. Give me a few of your thoughts about what this 6-month warning that Donald Trump is going to end the Dreamers program means. What does it mean for the States, but what does it mean for Canada? And how do we deal with illegals differently here? There's so many questions. Why don't you just jump in?
Sure. Well, thanks for giving me the chance. First of all, you have to understand what DACA is. There's lots of foreigners who went to the United States. They may have gone for a wedding or for some other function, and they simply stayed, and they never left. And they were never on the radar of U.S. immigration authorities. And they may have come as a married couple with a couple of kids from back home, and they found, maybe the father found a construction job, he just started to work. The mom may have cleaned houses or something, and they've got a couple of foreign-born kids. Now, flash forward 10 years, they're still there. So these kids are now stuck because they are not American. They cannot disclose who they are. They can't get a driver's license. They can't get a study permit to go to school. They can't get a work permit to get a proper job. And if they try to get into a university, they're going to be asked for documents which they simply can't produce. So no one has ever proposed some sort of an amnesty for these people so that they can become permanent residents of the United States. Instead, Barack Obama in 2012, without passing legislation, he declared a policy. And this policy was designed to give some sort of breathing room to these poor kids who really never asked to be brought to the United States, but who are now effectively Americans with no papers and no rights. So this DACA provided deferred action. Deferred action means we're not going to deport you. Just register. If you came to the United States at a certain age and you haven't gone into trouble and you're going to school, we're going to help you get a driver's license. We're going to help you get a study permit. We're going to help you get a work permit so you can make something of yourself. And that's a great initiative. That's a great initiative. But it doesn't lead anywhere. It's just deferred action. Separately, they had a DREAM Act, which was designed to maybe give some of these kids permanent residency in the United States. But that never went anywhere. That never got off the ground. So now this policy of Barack Obama is under threat of cancellation in 6 months. So now these kids are going crazy. What are we going to do? So obviously, everybody knows that our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that we are a welcoming country, hashtag welcome to Canada. And so a lot of these kids are now looking to Canada as a potential solution. And I think there's at least one senator who's saying, look, why don't we bring in and sort of give relief to about 30,000 of these kids who've been in the United States illegally through no fault of their own. I think the point that you were talking about earlier in introducing me, I have been asking the following question over the last few days. What about the kids in Canada in exactly the same situation? Their parents brought them to Canada. They're here without status. They can't get into university. They cannot get a job that is proper because they don't have a study permit. They are constantly, every minute of the day, under fear of removal at any time. They are afraid to get into a car. They're afraid to change jobs. They're afraid to annoy anybody out of fear that someone might rat them out to immigration. So my question is, where is our DACA? Before we start looking after cleaning up the mess in the United States, maybe we should look inside of Canada and say there are kids here, tens and tens of thousands, who need DACA-like treatment so that they can have some sort of normal life.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because I think that so much of Canada's immigration policy in the last 6 to 9 months has simply been whatever Donald Trump says, we'll do the opposite. So literally when Donald Trump announces his executive order to suspend migration from several Muslim-majority countries for 90 days, right on the heels of that, Justin Trudeau puts out his tweet, everyone's welcome to Canada. So such a clear response to it. Donald Trump says we're going to get rid of DACA in 6 months' time. Right away, a Liberal senator says, we'll take them. And it's always just to poke a stick in the eye of the United States, nothing to do with Canada's own policy interests. And as you point out, if we are feeling generous towards tens of thousands of young people, why would we be generous to American stowaways as opposed to Canadian stowaways who are in the identical position here? It's so clear to me, Giddy, that our immigration policy has one central thesis. Whatever Trump does, do the opposite in the most showy manner possible. Am I being too cynical? I'm quite cynical. Do I have justification for my views?
Well, my mom is not cynical. She's a wonderful woman, and she's always taught me that charity begins at home. And that's true. I believe that first of all, I believe that Canadians are very generous people. And I believe completely in the concept of the DACA regime, that these are kids who deserve our compassion and deserve our generosity. But I don't understand why we're looking on the southern side of the border. Let's look on the northern side of the border and look after the kids who are here, who are playing on our high school football teams and soccer teams, and who are working in our construction sites, who are doing all kinds of things to make our lives better. People are cleaning our homes, people are cutting the grass for us. Why don't we look after these kids and let them out of their misery before we start worrying about what the Americans are going to do? And quite frankly, I'm shocked that the media hasn't even asked the most fundamental question, which is, what is the situation like for our kids in our communities? You know, my children, I'm sure the children of many of your viewers, are going to school with kids who have no status in this country and who live every day in fear. Why don't we give them some relief? Why don't we ask our Prime Minister, instead of taking the ones from the United States, pass our own DACA and let them stay here on similar terms? Even the identical terms that the Americans have professed, there's nothing wrong with that. But let's do it here at home, a made-in-Canada solution to solving misery.
Well, you know, I've always said you've got such a warm heart, Giddy. That's why you've chosen to be an immigration and refugee lawyer. That's why your criticisms carry so much weight with me, because you come from a starting point. You believe in immigration. You believe in refugees. That's why I find your criticisms worth listening to, because I know if you were going to criticize the system, it's not because you were against immigration or the concept of refugees. It's because you want to see it better, smarter, and in Canada's interest. And this is what gets me about so many of the decisions over the last 9 months. If we truly want to bring to Canada tens of thousands of people who have some sort of underprivilege, if that's the basis, so they're not immigrants in our best interest, we're doing it in their interest. It's a charity move, it's a refugee move. Why would we not come up with our own list, our own criteria, choose our own people, whether they're from this part of the world or that part of the world, or if we're saving, you know, Christians from genocide and ISIS? At least it's a made-in-Canada decision, as opposed to letting them self-select at the border or basically do what would bother Donald Trump the most. If we're going to be generous, let it be on our terms, not the terms of not some reaction to Donald Trump. Last word to you, Giddy. I find your comments so interesting.
Sure.
Give us your final thoughts.
Look, Ezra, there are only a certain amount of finite tax dollars. And what I would like to see is immigration policy to use and get the maximum benefit out of those dollars. So instead of spending money to bring in 30,000 from the states, just so that we can take Donald Trump's face and rub his nose into the dirt, why don't we instead spend our resources and dedicate that money to kids who are already in Canada and part of our social fabric and give them some help? I think it makes eminent sense, and I would love to see the Prime Minister respond to that suggestion. There can be no, in my opinion, answer other than that. To take care of people in our own backyard before we start worrying about our neighbors.
Isn't that interesting? Giddy, I always enjoy you coming on the show. I always learn so much. I learned a little bit more about DACA and Dreamers, and I learned more about how Canada does it. I'm so grateful to you for your time and your expertise. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Immigration is so often in the news these days. I'm sure it won't be long before we invite you back.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Giddy. Wow, very interesting. I'm sure this story will keep on chugging because Donald Trump is not done yet, and so I regret Trudeau isn't either. Hey, if you like that, sign up for my show every day. Click on the screen to subscribe.